So my name is Bluesette Ossana. That's where the nickname comes from. It's actually a song by Toots Thielman, a jazz harmonica player. My dad loves jazz. My life has been, there's a certain duality to it. My mother was a school teacher. My father was an insurance salesman who basically was the head of this game. And when I was 2, they divorced. He got his 18-year-old secretary pregnant, and then next thing you know, he decided that he was going to become one of the largest drug dealers in the state of Utah. And as I grew, and I'm a daddy's girl, that is the life that I grew into. And he basically trained me to be that way. The first time I brought back a kilo of cocaine, I was 14 years old, and I had my 3 younger siblings with me. The youngest one was 18 months old. And that's the first time I ever had a panic attack. Pretty much drug dealing was at the core of everything that I did. And so in that process, I lost my 2 oldest children. And in that point, it was like, why should I even try? I lost my job at the park. I could no longer be a substitute teacher. My life just spiraled from there. I did a year in jail waiting for treatment. A bed never opened. And then
a year waiting for.
Yeah, so I'm from a rural area, and there's such a gap in delivery of services for people who are in rural areas, as far as support. So I mean, like, that's the one beautiful thing about USARA is that we've opened centers in Price, in Moab, in St. George, and Ogden.
Yeah.
And to kind of even bridge that gap, there's still not. My oldest child, she was at the University of Utah. And she wrecked her car in Wellington. And my son and I went to go get her. And she rolled up her sleeve and showed me that she was addicted to heroin. All of her veins were collapsed. And she asked me for help. She was a child prodigy. She really was. Everything that I've gathered and information, she was just an amazing. Second in state in debate, 11th in the country, a debate judge. She was getting ready to go to Stanford. She learned how to speak French. We sent her to Paris, and she didn't want to let them down. And so the night before I was going to come up and take my daughter or woo her into going to treatment, I was picked up by AP&P. And while I was incarcerated, and I had 3 charges, which they gave me a plea deal for 2 second-degree felonies. My daughter, who had 15 months clean, relapsed and died.
Oh my God. Wow.
She was 24. And it fractured my family. It fractured me. And for 2 years, I ran around and tried to keep my 2 other children alive. I got a hardship. I couldn't get a job. I couldn't go to the library. And I begged my case manager to take me back to the prison. And I had been in prison at that time for 2 years and 2 months. And then about a month later, I discovered that my son was using meth. And
how old was he at the time?
23.
Yeah.
2 years later, because I terminated, so I wasn't on parole this time, I started using. It was unmanageable. The grief was unmanageable. I didn't know who I was if I wasn't Lisa's mother.
Do you feel like the using then was an escape, an attempt to just anywhere but here, anyone
the
but
grief
me,
was
anytime
so much
but now, right?
Because I had failed.
Yeah.
The one thing that she really asked me for, I'd failed at, and ended up in prison. I knew I had to get clean. I just needed a sense of community.
Yeah.
The women in that community were amazing, and so
Awesome.
it was a sense of community.
Yeah. And it sounded like that's what you were lacking most of your life, was that you were the breadwinner, you were the one, but you were falling apart and there was nobody there for you.
Yeah, and the expectations that my mother wanted for me and were so, I couldn't see that. Yeah. I couldn't believe that could be real. I did 3 years in prison. My daughter had died. My 2 children almost went to prison. So I'm a person in long-term recovery. I've been in recovery for 7 years, and what that means to me is that I have a life that I'm present in my children's life. I have a grandchild.
Awesome.
I didn't think I could love thank you. I didn't think I could love anybody more than I love my children. But
boy or girl?
It's a girl. Ava is her name. And
Very cool.
She was born when I was in prison, but my family is so amazing that my daughter brought her in when she was 3 weeks old. And for 2 hours, I just got to stare at this beautiful human being. And my kids trust me, and they know that I'm there for them, and they weren't always sure of that.
What is the name of this building that we're sitting in right now? Or what's the name of
the organization is Utah Support Advocates for Recovery Awareness.
Okay.
And I'm a certified peer support specialist. I'm on several committees and boards. One of them is with the Department of Corrections.
Okay.
I'm on a steering committee to create a forensic peer support model to be introduced into the Department of Corrections.
Wow.
I'm also on the Women's Symposium, which is to help women transition out of incarceration. And I'm also on the Utah Peer Conference Committee. So peers can come together, have a place where they can talk, and we've done it virtually this year.
The first time I met you, you handed me pamphlets.
Yeah.
This was pre-COVID, so I know
Yeah.
COVID has really affected things, but I know you still have online.
Yes.
But what I noticed that was very interesting is that there wasn't one type of treatment. Like I noticed you had 12-step programs, you had religiously based programs, you have smart recovery, cognitive based programs. How many different options do people have when they come here? You even have a Buddhist meditation
Buddhist-based
group,
Dharma recovery. Dharma
recovery.
It used to be called refuge recovery, but now it's called Dharma recovery.
Could you just walk us through what those different options are for people like, I want to get treatment, but I prefer this or that, and why would people choose one over the other?
Well, there is, there's been this piece of anonymity. And I think that it's been a real deterrent for people to become more aware of substance use disorder issues. Mm-hmm. And at one point, and I can't remember her name, but I think it was Miriam, but she got a variety of celebrities together in the 60s, I think, late 60s. And they came out as people that had either drinking issues or pills or whatever it was. And then it was shut down. And I think that the stigma, shame that is connected to addiction, although there are all types of addictions. There's addictions to technology, there's addictions to food, gambling, sex. There's so much that, and it shouldn't be something. The more you isolate somebody, the more isolated and antisocial they're going to be. Mm-hmm. And especially if they have adverse childhood trauma, right there needs to be a community support. There needs to be, it's not us and them, it's just us.
Yeah.
And so part of the 12-step model, I used to have a fellowship with 12-step, and I had some really bad experiences.
Like what?
After the arrest, and there was accusations and a lot of ego-driven, like setting me apart from, and there was no support. And it's like, you said, well, you have to start over. You have to start at zero. And I go, but wait, no, there was no belief, there was no support. I tried to get a sponsor, and I called several times, never got a response. 13th step is really prevalent, and that is people who prey on newcomers and for sexual fulfillment.
The other thing I want to bring up, though, is the issue of identity. One of the complaints that I've heard from some people is that in a 12-step program, often there's an ontological, like this being, you are an addict, you are an alcoholic. Did that impact you in some way?
I never really wrapped my head around it until I looked at Masaru Emoto's water experiment.
Oh, the emotions in water that are...
You know how our thought and words have power. Masaru Emoto is a philosopher and a researcher in Japan who took water from a variety of different sources, and some were very toxic, some were very pure, and he flash froze them and spliced them. And then he took water from a pristine place, and they started with words that they put on them.
Like what?
I love you. You're beautiful. I love you. You're ugly. I want to kill you. And then flash froze them again and spliced them and put them under a microscope. And the difference between the two was phenomenal.
I know.
And it's like the one that was spoken negatively, even with it on just paper, just words on paper, shifted. They were not pristine. You know, like water crystals are like snowflakes.
Mm-hmm.
They have their individual shapes and everything, and this was just globules of water. And then the other ones that you spoke beautifully to, and they've stepped it up to rice and plants. And so we as human beings are 70% water. And that right there, so I've never been anything until I came here, but an ex-con, a felon, a drug dealer, a drug addict, and somebody who was involved in a murder, all of these things, right, defined me.
That's like such a Brene Brown issue, right? The shame
and
of not just I did something bad.
I am bad. Everything
right?
about me
Yeah.
is bad. And I did not want my kids to feel that way about themselves because I was their mother. Because it started with when my father was arrested, and then everybody knew what my dad did. And so then it made it even more like under a microscope for me. And I was different. My life experience was different, so I didn't fit anywhere. And so I created my own space. And as far as that goes, it's like every day, in every way, people define themselves and paint themselves into a corner by their beliefs about themselves. And that starts the dialogue that continually goes in our head. And
when you say that people many times don't even realize they have these subconscious beliefs,
right?
They're not sure why they repeat behaviors. They can't. They find themselves.
Like, I don't know why I did that. And so, I mean, that was a huge thing for me, because when I was in prison, one of the things that impacted me the most is I taught Thinking for a Change, and I taught at the National Institute of Corrections had a format that the basis of it was a rational emotive behavior therapy. And I really identified with the ability to be able to, and I refer to it as Dumbledore's pensieve, where he takes his wand and pulls the thought out or the memory and puts it in the pensieve, and then he's able to explore that memory. For me, it was the actions, right? Activating events, beliefs, consequences. What is our core belief about ourselves or instances that take place in our life that may be conflict or just distress within ourselves? And it could be, like I said, people who have trauma or ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. That is, I scored an 11, and it could be a smell, it could be a line, a lyric, it could be driving past a place.
It creates that panic,
that
right?
creates that distress, that creates that panic. And then that subconscious thing that happens, that's based in our amygdala and that limbic system part of our brain, is what drives us to behave in those certain ways, because we didn't start using because it was bad for us. We started using or drinking because it met a need.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's where that stays is our survival primal part of our brain. And so when somebody says to me, I don't know why I feel compelled to use, I know that it's bad for me, I know I'm going to be a train wreck, but I do it anyway. And that right there in itself is something that I have said to myself time and time again.
I think that's very human.
Yeah.
On all kind of issues.
Right.
Like someone like it could be even addiction to anxiety and concern and worry, right? There's this really good author who wrote a book, Lucinda Bassett, From Panic to Power. She talks about her journey out of agoraphobia and panic anxiety. And in many ways she describes that she was addicted to anxiety. She didn't know how to live without being worried all the time.
I feel like my mother experiences that. And and also, like all of the things that connect you more to yourself.
Yeah.
And radical acceptance, because the reality of it is, I cannot change the past.
Yeah.
I do not know what's going to happen in the future. So really, all I have is today, right now, to be present. And how well am I doing that,
Let's get to the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And we can come back to some of these, but thank you first of all. I think stories like the one you shared speak way more to people sometimes than just facts.
Right.
And often stories more like qualitative research lead us to look at the issues that probably we want to investigate further. But the limitation, so you talked about the 12-step program. There are aspects that bother you. Can you mention maybe a couple that were positive, and then the areas where you felt like it needs work, it's failing you?
So the sense of community is at the core of that, but it's the there are people that can stop using a substance or stop drinking alcohol, but they still have the same behaviors.
Is that what you would call
A dry drunk?
Dry drunk,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that term used before. That means that they're not drinking, but what?
they still have those behaviors. They still have the behaviors and are ego-driven and never really. They're angry and
frustrated,
right?
right?
And like.
Are they living with a sense of loss?
I think that it's more like nobody really knows me. You're just a newcomer, and I'm an old timer. And you have to do what I say. And not everybody's agenda is pure. And so that whole, I'll be your sponsor, I'll be the person that supports you, and then never show up. But the sense of community was great.
Yeah.
And that's all that was available in Moab. And that's all there was. And that's all there has been for such a long time.
And that's actually another issue, the rural versus urban access. That's an issue we have to deal with too. I've noticed in the studies that is a huge issue,
yes.
A huge problem. But for mental health, it's become a problem. Now, a lot of the issues that you talked about, I've actually had the chance to observe SMART recovery. What does SMART stand for as an acronym?
Specified Management and Recovery Training.
Okay.
And so it's a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy and then rational emotive behavior therapy. So when I discovered SMART, I'm like, hey, this is my jam.
Why did it get you so excited?
Because that ability to be able to connect to myself and utilize the tool to help guide me in a way that addressed urges, addressed, that dialogue, reframing those thoughts that I have, like I'm a loser, my kids are just going to end up like me and end up in prison and die, and all of those things. Everybody has a possibility.
Good.
Everybody has a chance.
Another thing I noticed is very fascinating in talking to people that attended SMART is they really appreciate the fact that you're allowed crosstalk.
Yeah.
Now, our audience may not understand why that's meaningful.
So in 12-step, a person can share, and there's not any crosstalk allowed. And I think that one of the reasons why their SMART is so amazing is because people can give them feedback in the moment instead of after a meeting or at coffee. So
it's not monologues.
No.
It's a dialogue.
Right. And some monologues can go on forever.
Yeah.
And then there's no space for anybody else to feel present and accounted for.
Now, one of your facilitators I spoke with over the phone, he said that there was a study by SMART Recovery that combined SMART and 12-step programs. Do you recommend that?
I've not investigated that.
So that's something maybe we should look into.
Yeah.
As a possibility.
Yeah. I just and it's like, if it works for you, then it works for you, and I'm going to support you in that. And that's why I love peer support, is because I am not a clinician. I'm not a person that's looking in a book and going like, this is what you need to do, right?
So it's not prescriptive. It sounds like you're giving a lot of subjective power to the individual to find her or his way.
Right.
It works.
The core of SMART is motivational interviewing.
Okay.
Where you do there's the ORSI model, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, summaries, and information. And that's the acronym for ORSI. I did, I'm also certified as a CARES, which is from Atlanta, Georgia, and they have an amazing
What does that stand for?
Certified Addiction Recovery Empowerment Specialist.
Awesome, I love the title.
Yeah, it's kind of wordy, but they have some amazing things. And so they offered 4 scholarships to people that worked here, and we had to write our letters and so I was one of the people that was chosen to go.
Awesome.
And so that was amazing. It was an amazing experience, and I learned so much. And part of that motivational interviewing is it's not about what I think. It's listening to that individual and then hearing, I'll give you an example. I've tried 1,000 times to quit. I can last maybe a week to 2 weeks, and I'm such a loser. I'm such a failure. And what I hear is that you are resilient and you have strength because you keep on trying.
What a difference of perspective.
Right? And they're going,
and maybe then no one's ever breathed that into their life.
Ever.
Right.
And so in that moment, there is a like, yeah, I do want this.
So it sounds like, so you have a lot of roles. You're wearing a lot of hats. You do also have a lot of experience and knowledge that is good for what you're doing here. But as an expert in your field, what are the weaknesses that you're like, man, I wish somebody would research this. I wish somebody would go further with this. I see a gap here. Like if we were able to like take things and help improve it, what would you suggest we look at?
Well, I mean, so there's a lot of different ideas that I have. The fact that we incarcerate more people than any other country other than the Philippines, and they offer money to shoot people who deal drugs or use drugs. Did you realize?
I did not know that.
Yeah. So that's like a bounty that's on people that have an addiction. And then you have Portugal, who addressed the issue of 1% of their population was addicted to heroin, and they wanted to change it. And so they got the brightest minds together, and they decided to decriminalize everything from cocaine to cannabis and take all the money from incarceration and do wraparound services.
I had read about that.
Yeah, so housing, jobs, partnering with organizations and different companies to create a space for connections.
And that's what you mean by wraparound. I've heard you use that before, wraparound services.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a holistic, integrated.
Absolutely, and it's not prescriptive,
justice,
right? And I'm so passionate about this because, like when you go to prison, you just become a better drug dealer and a better addict because you get more.
Know that.
Yeah, get more. And if you didn't know something about a criminal aspect of, because that's the box you're put in, and that's your belief, then possibility for change is limited. That's why the recidivism rate is so high.
The what rate?
Recidivism. People who go back to prison.
Got it. Okay.
So, it's like, as a coach, I see a lot of people that are coming out of prison and coming out of treatment. And it's, for people that are coming out of prison, the barriers are so huge. The disconnect for people to have a safe place to live. I'm so lucky because every place that I looked at when I got out of prison this last time, because I didn't go back to Moab, to my mom's property, and because it's a rural area, it was like every place was just like a setup.
That's another problem that needs to be addressed, I think.
Absolutely huge.
Addict or former addicts coming out of the prison system.
Right.
Yeah. One thing I read is that oftentimes there's certain compounds that can really help get somebody detached from that ego that you were referring to earlier.
Right, the spirit molecule.
Yeah, like 5-MeO DMT is known for its ego death. The advantage seems to be, from the stories I've heard and the experts I read about, is detachment from the sense of self to the point of looking at your life issues and your narrative, those stories, from an objective perspective, and coming back a few minutes later with answers.
And I think that that's at the core of it all, because a lot of people can't let go of who they think they are.
I like how you said that, who they think they are.
Right? Yeah. So if they let go of their trauma and their behaviors, then who will they be? And even though it's uncomfortable and it causes disconnect and negative experiences for them, they can't change who they are because the possibility of the unknown is so frightening that they cling to it.
Yeah, Lucinda Bassett talks about that.
And it's cling to it. And
it's all you know.
It's all you know.
The unknown is more scary than the current misery, right?
And for men, it's even more so. Because the men's side of the prison is different than the women's. Men's side is brutal. And they have to click up with either the Aryan Brotherhood or some kind of faction so that they can survive. And so then they come out of prison, and not only do they have an attachment to these people that have an expectation for them to behave in a certain way, it's also that machismo that is displayed. And it's just an endless cycle.
Yeah.
I can't let go of who I am, because if I did, then I won't have this or this or this. Then if I go back to prison, I won't have protection. I won't be protected.
So Aryan Brotherhood is a huge issue. We know that white supremacy, the FBI has rated it one of the greatest threats to our national security, these militia groups we have. On the other hand, it seems like the majority of men that are incarcerated for drug issues are minorities.
Yes.
Right?
But I mean, we have SAC and SAW and soldiers. I don't
that?
even really know what the acronyms stand for, but
What do they do?
they're Aryan Brotherhood.
Oh, really? Here?
Here in Utah, yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So there's this. There are a lot of minorities, but there's a lot of white men that are in prison.
Is there? So one thing we're trying to look at too is if we could focus on specific demographics that really need help the most right now. What are the demographics? Can you get as specific as you can about demographics you like? We need to focus on this.
Right. So I know that I've talked a lot about prison because that's my lived experience, but people are homeless on the streets. They're homeless on the streets and they don't have an opportunity. You know, I see all of these apartment buildings that are going up everywhere. You know, a one-bedroom apartment downtown is $2,300.
Wow.
So there's this
right next to tents of people. Right. I've seen them with my own eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those people that are like on 7th South a lot of them are women waiting to get into the shelter. And a lot of those people, so before when you'd get out of prison, you'd get at least $150. And they're trying to step up their services. They want to reduce recidivism. And that's, I mean, I'm a part of an SRR peer work group for Department of Corrections, like I said before. And it's like, and the women's transition. We go back to the same thing every single time. What is the barrier? What is that area? So minorities that have been incarcerated, homeless, incarceration, they continually go in and out. There's no mental health. There's no support.
Is there an age range you see the most?
No.
It's all ages.
All ages.
Anybody with certain ideological background, belief system? No, right?
No, not really. It's just it's throughout. And they're, you know, like I've met women who were good Mormon housewives that discovered methamphetamine because they had too many expectations for them, and then end up embezzling or whatever to maintain their habit. To a 72-year-old woman who wants to stop drinking but doesn't know how, and her daughter drinks as well, and she's white collar. She lives in a very nice home, you know.
That describes Annie Grace perfectly here.
Yeah,
we mentioned her before. She was a successful marketing expert,
right. And there's so much. It's just, I mean, I'm coaching somebody right now who's, you know, somebody who's a successful businessman, and he rates everything, you know, like as if it were a business deal. And although we don't have similar lived experience, our interactions, there's this common ground. And it's like, he shares with me that I've been really insightful to help him because he's afraid of losing his marriage.
What are the reasons? A lot of people want help. You mentioned the 70-something-year-old lady who wants to quit drinking and she can't. What are the reasons why people are reluctant to get help?
Well, the cost. The cost of treatment, the cost of mental health services, the shame, the stigma. People, I'll give you an example. When I went to SLIC, I had the most amazing, Salt Lake Community College.
Thank you.
To get my associates in social work, in sciences. And at the very end of the class, she shared that she was a person in recovery. And that organization, that university or whatever, didn't want her back.
Wow. Isn't that illegal?
I would imagine.
Are there protections?
But I'm sure that there's all these different ways you can navigate around that.
Actually, I probably need to look into that if there are legal protections, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
I really don't know.
I don't know. But I'm still a part of a group of hers because she made a huge impact in my life. I mean, coming here and meeting Mary Jo was what changed the direction of my life.
And can you tell me a little bit about Mary Jo?
Mary Jo McMillan is the executive director of USARA. This was a grassroots movement that started in 2007, which main focus was advocacy, and now it's morphed into this. We have three different programs. we have long-term coaching, but it starts with ARCHES. ARCHES is addiction recovery coaching in healthcare and emergency settings. So we have peer coaches that are deployed to people that go to the emergency room for an overdose, for any kind of drug-related or alcohol-related issue. Then we have CRAFT, which is community reinforcement and family training.
Yeah.
And that is for family members that have loved ones that have substance use disorders. So because addiction just doesn't touch the person, it affects everybody.
That's an important point.
Right? And so it's the whole thing. And so CRAFT is a model. They're given a book that says how to get your loved one sober. And then there's a 12-week workbook that Darlene Schultz is our director of that. But she was literally a volunteer here for what? 10 years. 10 years, and then in 2017 she was hired. So we try to cover all those areas.
No, that's what really impressed me. Like what I mentioned earlier, the Buddhist, the Dharma recovery thing, their philosophy. I wouldn't even call it religious.
On Fridays, they have a virtual meeting, which that's the basis of the meditation, and then they also have a book study on Sundays as well. Okay. And so it's a 12-step model, but it's with Buddhist-based principles.
Do you feel the challenge with access to treatment is cost or patient readiness to change?
I think that it's a combination, but most of all, it's not something that's readily available. So what Utah has done is they have a targeted adult Medicaid for people who are chronically homeless or criminally justice involved. And that right there has been a huge help, but it's still, there's all these people that fall within the gaps. You can't have made $50 within the last 30 days, but the benefits to those is that doesn't matter if you get a job in that process, you still get to keep it's all about healthcare. It's all about access to healthcare and healthcare should include all of the things, that whole wraparound services, like I was saying. And peer support is now just becoming Medicaid approved, but it still doesn't really cover it.
One of the things one of your attendees brought up is that transportation was an issue. Proximity is an issue.
Especially
you kind of addressed that with the rural versus urban situation, right? So is SMART and groups like SMART or these programs trying to reach more to the rural areas of America?
That's been a huge thing. So Rebecca Roberts, she used to facilitate the SMART meeting up in Wasatch because she lived there.
Got it.
And although I don't live there.
So anybody can train, right?
Anybody
can
get
certified.
Absolutely. And you can go on smartrecovery.org anyway and get the workbook. I mean, I have a participant that is so, he got the book way before I ever even started attending meetings just to get an idea of what it was about. And he was just so gung-ho. And, my wish is that I could just give out books.
Speaking of that book, everybody, because it's been in movies, it's been in shows, everybody knows the big book, right? The 12-step big book. How does this book differ?
So it's not about people's stories. It's not about, because everybody has a story, and that check-in process, where somebody might be struggling, and that where the crosstalk is this huge componency, because, hey, I used this tool, or I didn't even know, before I started doing SMART, it was like, I used to say, what are the pros and cons? But in SMART, it's the cost-benefit analysis. What is this going to cost me, and what is the benefit for it? And that is huge, because that's also that connection to yourself and utilizing tangible tools. I am a spiritual person, and I had a hard time with having faith in a higher power. I wanted tangible, real substance, and that's what the SMART book has. It has real, tangible tools that you can take any given situation and break it down.
Another colleague of mine was mentioning that the LGBT community has issues. The people in the LGBT community are like, we need to deal with our own problem of addiction. Do you think it's something that is because of the stigmatization of identity that's causing that?
I absolutely believe that's true.
Okay.
My son is gay.
Yeah.
And, and it's also social media sites. So, my lived experience also encompasses the fact that I'm a huge ally of the LGBTQIA community. And when looking for support for gay men that are on Grindr or Adam to Adam or Scruff, and that's where you can basically.
And these
it's like,
sites, for
are
people
like,
who don't know,
they're
these are
like dating sites.
okay.
But it's a much more. There's so much more to it.
Okay.
They can put on their profile P&P, which means party and play, and that means drugs and sex are delivered to your door. So men who access these sites are 4 times more likely to go out.
Interesting. Okay.
And so I reached out.
So it is a problem.
Yes, I reached out to the Stonewall Project in San Francisco,
Okay.
because searching for support for these men, because being a mother of I love my son, and anybody that tells me that there's something wrong with him because of who he loves, I won't have anything to do with. And so it's like he has had an experience with his partner who he didn't understand. We're from Moab. That just isn't a thing, right? But here in Salt Lake, it's a thing. And it's just because I am.
When you say it's a thing, are you saying it's stigmatized?
Stigma.
Much more?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, because of conversion therapy. Think of the trauma of telling somebody intrinsically they're bad.
Mm-hmm.
And if they just believed in God, they're good. And stop behaving in the manner that they, but it's just, it makes me livid because my son tried to kill himself when he was 15.
I did miss something. I don't want to miss it because Tracy had asked, and that is about the transportation proximity issue. Is there a demographic that you find has more difficulty with proximity or transportation?
Well, like I said, the rural, but mostly homeless.
Okay. What about race and ethnicity?
For
Gender.
sure. We have a large Polynesian, I'm struggling for the words, culture here in Utah, Hispanic, Black.
A lot more diverse than used to be.
Absolutely. And
also, Silicon Slopes are probably helping bring more diversity.
Absolutely.
Right? Yep.
Yeah. And so it's like there's literally, they don't even know, because it's not something that's just regularly talked about because of cultural. The Navajo Nation, they suffer.
Mm-hmm.
They live in hogans that don't have running water or electricity. I wonder how somebody would even imagine to live like that. No Wi-Fi. So you can't even really call anybody unless you have a tower that's close to you. There's a huge disconnect for people of every minority.
Do you feel like Salt Lake City is monitoring this lack of access? How do they monitor these challenges to access? Is it based on their perception from patient conversations? Do they track regular data, or do they have quality improvement projects based on no-shows, % of patients that are in their service compared to patient actually using the service? Is there a way, in other words, to monitor so we can actually look at the problem more?
Well, the disparity, even trying to find those numbers, what they are, because if you're a nonprofit or if you're somebody that's trying to create a nonprofit, finding those numbers, it's like going down a rabbit hole to see where the disparity is. And I really believe that they have their own agendas of what is acceptable and what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to get better at it, just like the changes with the Department of Corrections. But it's like, how do you change people's beliefs? Because look at our country right now.
Yeah.
And it's so divisive. And there's just, it's
so much propaganda.
And so being fed, and Facebook is the devil.
And I want to actually deal with that for a second, because one of the things that Annie Grace deals with so well, being a woman who was in marketing, she talks about this propaganda.
It's a
now, we see it with the election, the propaganda that the election is stolen, lie, and all that. But she addressed it on the issue that we know, for example, that one of the most toxic drugs out there, that more deaths than any illegal or legal drug combined, is alcohol. This ethanol substance destroys your brain, your body, everything, right?
Makes everybody mushy.
And yet, I watch movie after movie. Heck, you can even watch Hallmark Christmas movies, right? And everybody's enjoying wine and champagne, and it's like this. It's marketed as a social lubricant. It's marketed as making you sexy. How do you overcome this thing in America that's happening? This propaganda, this completely anti-science,
right,
anti-fact.
Mm-hmm.
We don't show the destroyed lives.
No,
right?
Because they're not popular.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody really wants to connect to reality. And that's what social media and movies and all of that push. And that, there's been some amazing movies in relation to recovery. And
Yeah.
I suggest that everybody watches The Anonymous People.
The Anonymous People. Okay. I have not seen it.
You have not seen it.
Is it a documentary or a movie?
It's a documentary.
Yeah.
And it's about the anonymity and how that, how during that period of time it met a need.
Mm-hmm.
And but now it's like, because of the anonymity, created such stigma and shame, and also reinforced the belief. And that's all that there was.
What is payer mix, like more Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance, and is there a difference in access based on coverage type?
So, perfect example. My son's partner is trying to get into treatment right now.
Okay.
So he's on Medicaid. So they'll pay for the treatment part, but it's an inpatient, so you have to reside there. It's a completely different cost. And in other treatment facilities, $30,000, $15,000, even $6,000. Everybody, and then with the state of finances right now and the way everybody is scrambling just to live. And then we have alcohol that's on every corner. There's been an increase in alcohol use. There's been an increase in domestic violence. We are slammed here.
What are the best standard outcome measures for maintaining patient success on a practice profitability?
So if somebody had diabetes or, you're not going to condemn that person for eating a candy bar, right? Although they could lose limbs, and it's support, understanding, and connection. The opposite of addiction is connection.
Nice. That's powerful. So as we wrap up, Blue, first of all, thank you. Are there any parts of today's interview that you do not want to be public?
Like I said, I'm an open book.
I love your story. And actually, I would love if you grant me the opportunity to come back for another interview after we have processed some of this and worked through some details.
Absolutely.
Right now, we're in the problem phase. We just want to focus on the problem.
Right. And I mean, I never really got to speak about DMT because I've been researching it for years.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that when we first engaged in conversation on the phone, it automatically came up.
Yeah.
And
that was interesting, by the way, that it did come up.
Yes, and so
yeah.
And it's like, so I am just super excited and hopeful. Like I text you, I said I'm just so hopeful because so many people are suffering. I think it should be a quadrant. And here's why. Here's why. Because I believe that peer support changed my life, and it's changed so many other people's lives. And so if we're a part of the process, then we are the people that understand what that person is going through. And we may not have the same exact experience, but just the fact that it's a space of non-judgment, that they can come talk to us and we listen, and then connect them to the things that they might need to make their lives more. Because once you get recovery, it's like, so who am I? I asked one girl what her favorite color was. She said she had no idea, And that's where that conversation begins. It's like, so what would you really like to do? Because, it's like when you're facing all those barriers, you can go to work in a factory. I never thought that I could be where I'm at right now. If you would have told me 10 years ago that I would actually run a program 6 months after I got my job here, I would tell you, you're crazy.
Unbelievable.
Right?
So to wrap it up, Lou, I want to ask you a powerful question.
Okay.
We've heard your story.
Right.
The journey's been amazing, movie worthy. People need to know this, right? Who are you?
I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I'm here to help. And that means I help myself too. And I am just so grateful. I live in this place of gratitude, even with hard challenges. And SMART has been a huge component of that. What worked for me because of SMART was because of the repetitive, over and over and over and over and going, so that I could refine down. So that if there is a possibility to make that there's more clarity in dealing with the subconscious and the core beliefs that people have about themselves, about who they are, and the possibilities, then that's huge. But I also believe it should be a quadrant, and that's all I have to say
I
about
love
that.
it. Thank you so much, Blue.
You bet.
I really appreciate it. I hope to see you soon enough to
Yeah.
do
Just
phase 2 of interviewing.
Absolutely. I'll be around.
Have a great weekend.
You too.